Let the truck!
You are listening to What the Truck. Welcome, it's Monday. You're listening to What the Truck. I'm Thomas Wasson, gonna be hosting for today. Gonna have a pretty fun show. Also, it's gonna be even more fun show because it's my birthday. So that's right, I get to pick the things to talk about. Well, let's speak about what we're talking about today. We're gonna go through some news and headlines. Our guests for today, our first one is going to be coming up later on, Scott Cornell. He's the Vice President of Transportation at Travelers. We're gonna be talking about cargo theft trends. Later on, I've been traveling places and I want to share that with you. That is my gift to you, dear listener. And so we're going to be talking about cranes. That's right. If you've caught me on social media, I've had some experiences talking about school buses, but I wanted to one up myself. And so, like Wu-Tang Clan says, steel sharpens steel. We're going to be interviewing the folks at Maxim Crane Works. Dennis Collins, he's the Vice President of Operations. This was from the Samsara Beyond event. Going to be a really fun interview. They have one of the world's largest cranes. There's like 2 or 3 of them, and it takes a long time to set up. So, going to be a fun one. And then finally, we're going to be diving into a little bit of autonomous stuff near the end. I found out that the folks at Aurora have their self-driving trucks are live streaming. So, man, it is a brave new world. So, let's dive into a little bit of headlines before we get to the real meat and potatoes of the show. This first one, written by yours truly. Truck Stop has unveiled a new private load boards. It's streamlining the freight matching between brokers and carriers. And so this feature is combining both private and public loads into one platform to enhance trust and efficiency. So they announced it last week. The feature allows freight brokers to efficiently engage with pre-vetted carriers and with the same trust and security available to the company's regular public load board. And so this one's a really cool one here because private load boards have existed since the dawn of time. It's just the challenges, if you're a smaller carrier, is to get access to them. It's like trying to get in that really hyped up club, but the bouncer woke up on the wrong side of the bed. And so talking about getting access to private load boards with pre-vetted ones, it's a fascinating trend because when I worked at a very large carrier, we had tons of private load boards. The shipper had a load board, a specific broker had a load board, a 4PL like Transplace via the shipper had a load board. There were tons of different ones. And so if listeners are thinking about load boards like your DATs and truck stops of the world, well, the private ones are now becoming more public. So hopefully that helps everyone get more access to freight. Speaking of needing more access to freight, a California trucking company has closed its operations after 40 years in business. FreightWaves' Caleb Revel writes that TGS Transportation has closed operations due to challenging market conditions facing the industry. The Fresno, California-based drayage trucking company announced on Thursday of last week that it was closing operations effective the same day. This came from a letter posted on LinkedIn by TGS President Peter Schneider. The letter, addressed to vendor partners and industry friends, they stated the decision to close was difficult and it was influenced by challenging freight market conditions. They also noted that they thanked their employees for their hard work and dedication over the last year and a half period, which had been especially challenging. The company, TGS, was founded back in May of 1985, according to the company's website. According to the Safer data, the company had hauled various items that employed 20 drivers and operated over 20 power units. In other news, we're switching gear a little bit to employment data. That's been the talk of the town if you love macroeconomics. This one being at least we don't have to worry about the revisions. FreightWaves' John Kingston writes that trucking jobs had bucked the tide. They rose in July, while warehouse employment is plummeting. With recent revisions, the number of people who are working in warehouses is down to late 2021 levels. So when we're looking at seasonally adjusted truck transportation jobs, they rose by 3,600 to 1.5 million, according to data released by the Bureau of Labor Standards. Truck transportation jobs in July were up 6,600 more compared to last year. And unfortunately, though, the 2 months in particular, that just released July number, they had that 8,000 added for March. There's a lot of information going in here. But the biggest shift, though, that you want to pay attention to was that, unfortunately, warehouse jobs took a big hit. They are down 6,400 jobs after a large 12,000 downward revision for June. More for trucking, less for warehouse. Now, remember though, BLS data does not include independent owner operators. And so the reports of higher employment are coming even as companies are closing. If you just noticed, we talked about one that shut down. So that could be when they look at the BLS data like that. The owner operators are definitely the hardest one to figure out because we can figure out employment data on the large for hire carriers and trucking in general. But with the smaller fleets and owner operators, it's kind of like electrons. We know that they're there, but it's a very fuzzy thing. Finally, this one is a finance story. Descartes is buying an e-commerce inventory management platform for $40 million. FreightWaves' Todd Maiden writes that Finale Inventory acquisition complements their other e-commerce investments. So it acquired cloud-based inventory management company Finale Inventory. Final, Finale, Finale. I guess it's, we'll find out after the final deal closed. Ha! The deal includes an upfront payment of approximately $40 million and a potential post-acquisition earnout of up to $15 million. The California-based company they bought helps e-commerce companies manage their inventory levels across multiple sales and fulfillment channels. Earlier in the year, though, there's been on an acquiring spree, Descartes is, and so the Ontario, Canada, and Atlanta-based global supply chain SaaS provider had also recently acquired 3G TMS, which did cloud-based transportation management solutions. That was earlier in the year for $115 million. So talk about gobbling up opportunities. Descartes is on the move. They're navigating it, just like Descartes, the map maker. That's right. I also do jokes, folks. I'm here till Thursday. Okay, well, let's dive into the real meat and potatoes here. We're going to be talking about switching gears, of course, cargo theft. And the folks at Travelers were so thankful enough to come join us and talk about it. So let's welcome on our guest here. We're going to be welcoming Scott Cornell, VP of Transportation at Travelers. Scott is a longtime guest for What the Truck. And Scott, it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
And so let's dive into this because it's very, very exciting, but cargo theft has really become a hot topic for those of us in the industry. And so looking at some data between 2022 and 2024, cargo theft is up over 93%. But this is where it gets interesting. One type of theft has skyrocketed even more. That is strategic theft. So we had you back on earlier in May to talk about it, but let's dive back into it because it looks like things are getting pretty real out there.
Yeah, the CargoNet data shows us, as you mentioned, that cargo theft as a whole in that time period is up over 90, I think it's about 93% dead on. But strategic theft in particular, which is the most difficult, the most complex type of cargo theft for the industry to deal with, is up 1,475%, something like that. So almost 1,500%, right? So that is where, strategic theft is when there's trickery involved, deception. They're not physically there. They're usually doing it remote. They're doing it virtually. And that's really hit the industry pretty hard. But, I think what's happening is a lot of people are seeing that big increase in strategic theft, and they're forgetting about straight theft.
And let's talk about the difference between strategic and straight theft. I am more familiar with straight theft from my trucking days, where you use bolt cutters, break a seal, kind of like a dine and dash where you're getting in there and getting out real quick. So let's talk a little bit more about the straight theft part now. Run us through some of the scenarios.
Yeah, so straight theft, I've said it on this show many times, cargo at rest is cargo at risk. It really speaks to when the freight is sitting still, tends to be truck stops, drop lots, parking lots, you name it. Pilferage is a big part of that. So when you ask about the difference between the two, again, strategic theft tends to be done virtually, remotely, phones, emails, email phishing, social, emails, social engineering emails, any kind of trickery that can get the freight in their hands. Straight theft is labeled straight theft because it's pretty straightforward. They're physically there stealing it. They're at the location stealing it. Pilferage is a prime example of that. I always say pilferage is the iceberg below the water when it comes to cargo theft because it's the least reported, but it's one of the most frequent, if not the most frequent method. And it's just like you said, they're cutting the bolt seals, they're breaking into the rear of the trailer, and in a lot of cases, if we stick with pilferage as an example, they're taking a few boxes, they're taking a pallet, they're taking 2 pallets, things like that. So they're not taking the tractor and the trailer, we still see plenty of that across the country. The industry sees plenty of that across the country where they take the entire tractor and trailer. But pilferage in particular, they're just getting into the trailer and taking part of the load.
And looking at the location, because it looks like from my days doing HVP freight, there were certain clusters and areas that we considered no zones in terms of making sure you have to go within a 200-mile radius, don't stop because of these threats. Let's talk about here in terms of straight theft. Are there any specific areas that folks should become aware of as we're getting this massive increase in data since 2022?
Yeah, so straight theft, when we talked about the increase in strategic theft, so that's gone from about 5% to maybe 33% of all cargo theft, but the straight theft still represents about 67% of all straight theft. And where we've really seen some of those hotspots, there's the traditional ones, Southern California, Houston, Dallas, Florida, all the places that are either around ports, Chicago, Memphis, or what we would consider inland ports because of the massive rail yards. But in particular, if we want to use a good example, the Arizona border of California has really become a hotspot for pilferage and follow crews over the past, let's say, 3 or 4 years. In particular, one of the reasons is drivers coming out of California, whether it's with food and beverage or high-end electronics, are trying to make it across that Arizona border and into Arizona because fuel is so much cheaper. So they wait until they get to Arizona for that first stop, and a lot of those follow crews know that, and they'll either follow them there or they'll actually put parts of their crew there waiting for those trucks to arrive, and they'll communicate ahead that, hey, this truck left this warehouse, this distribution center, things like that, and those trucks will get targeted.
So it's kind of like targeting the watering hole almost, where you've got a situation where these drivers
That's a
think
good
they're
analogy. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
predatory. It's predatory. So let's talk about what
Yeah.
happens with that. How do you stop it? Don't they have like surveillance cameras or something?
Well, yeah, the old camera question, right? So, 30 years of doing this roughly, and I can tell you that, first of all, cameras for the most part don't stop crime, right? This type of crime. Let's stick with cargo theft. For the most part, cameras don't really stop cargo crime. A lot of the cargo crews know that there's cameras around, things like that. In fact, a lot of truck stops may not even have cameras. That's not a criticism. They just may not. And a lot of the drivers aren't, if the parking's full, you're not necessarily parked in the truck stop anyway. You're outside the truck stop. There's actually more incidents of cases where the in-dash cameras, the outward-facing cameras from another truck catch the theft in progress than there is, a stationary camera, things like that. So we've seen investigators pull that type of video. But, we call those kind of popcorn reels. Get ready to watch the stuff get stolen. It's not really going to lead. Sometimes, they will put a fake license plate on the outside of the license plate. The vans that they use for these, or the box truck they use for these, are pretty, plain. They're just white trucks, white vans, white box trucks, or just, one solid color. There's not a lot of identifying marks on them. So if you're not picking any of that up from the video cameras, you're probably not going to get anywhere with that video.
So let's talk a little bit about preventative steps then, because it definitely feels like, given the situation and the stuff's being stolen from right under their noses, how do we work on preventing it? So when we're talking about that, what should companies and drivers be doing right now? And then we'll dive into some extra layers.
So we work with our clients on a layered basis when we teach them prevention, and there's 3 layers that we really work on. That first layer is good process and procedures, and a big part of that is educating your drivers. We've always said, I've said it very openly, I think the drivers are your best first line of defense. An educated driver, a driver who is made aware of, hey, you're hauling high-end electronics out of Southern California, and that hot spot right there at that Arizona border, that's a really bad spot. Can you go a little bit further, or could you stop ahead of time? Can you give them some fuel incentives that would make them, able to maybe go just a little bit farther, or a little bit shorter? But even just making them aware, even if they have to stop there, making them aware, hey, this is a real hot spot. Here's what's been going on there, and you're hauling that type of freight. That's a big deal, and drivers will tend to look for opportunities. Maybe they can back the trailer up against something so that the doors can't be opened, or they'll just be more aware on it. If you can't do that, you can get into high security rear door locks. And, can they cut through these things? Sure, but you're trying to make life difficult for them. And a lot of times, I'll suggest to my clients, take those high security rear door locks, put them on at the loading dock. So you're putting them way up high. So now you're just making life difficult for the bad guys. And then that those hard locking devices, air cuff locks, landing gear locks, high security rear door locks, that's the second layer, right? That's the second part of that 3-layer process. And then technology comes into play later on.
I like the layered with the locks, because that was the craziest thing that blew my mind, was that a lot of these things are plastic seals and you have the door closed and you wrap a little seal around it. And like for the longest time before fraudsters caught, no, that's kind of how we hauled things. And so even though a lot of these locks are not impervious, you brought up such a great point, make it so difficult that they have to make noise and they have to work for it. And then hopefully that brings the attention and the alarm. So then you can be like, hey, I'm going to, get away from my truck.
Exactly right. And you're just trying to make life very difficult for them, be a harder target, right? You don't want to be a soft target. And, I'm asked sometimes, don't the drivers hear this? Don't the drivers know that somebody's in the back of the at the back of the trailer trying to break into the trailer? No, these drivers have become accustomed to sleeping with the truck running. You have the noise of the truck, you have the noise of the truck stop. They're very accustomed to this. And it's not like these, when they're cutting the bolt seals and getting into the door, it's not like they're really rocking the truck, so to speak, or rocking the trailer. Have there been incidents of drivers finding it or, realizing that it's going on? Sure. But, I don't think people realize how accustomed that a lot of the drivers have become to sleeping with all that noise, sleeping with all that movement, trucks driving by, shaking their truck and their trailer. This is their life day in and day out. So they become very accustomed to that. And when you talk about the seals, seal locks are very important. So you can secure those rear doors, but if you're hauling something that's perishable or temp controlled or something like that, you need to protect the seal too. So seal locks are important as well.
That's one of the things that really operationally brings up, is making sure that drivers are putting seal numbers, bill of lading numbers, and they're checking. Because I can imagine a situation where for some of these drivers, alluding to your first point, which is education, as we're doing this multi-layered approach, go outside and check the seal. Because if I'm a fraudster and I know you just have a plastic seal, I can buy them at the truck stop. So what would stop me from stealing your stuff and then resealing it with a different number? And then Thomas is just busy. He's in a hurry. He does a quick pre-trep. He's like, it's a seal. And then nobody finds out until hundreds of miles later.
Yeah, you make a great point. They've gotten very good at doing that, right? They understand that the driver may be well aware that they have a yellow seal on the back. So when they cut that seal, they put the seal in their pocket. They don't throw it on the ground. A lot of the old crews, the old time crews, they used to just cut that seal, throw it on the ground, and then the driver would see it and report it. But, they cut that seal, they put it in their pocket, they take what they're going to take, and then they put another yellow seal on there. So the driver comes out, sees the yellow seal, everything's fine. They make their run, they get to the state, they get 5-6 states away to make the delivery, and the rear doors are open, and all of a sudden everybody realizes there's 2 pallets gone. Well, the problem is, where do you report that? You're not even sure where it happened. So now, who do you report that to? How do you report that? Who's going to take a report on that? Do you even have any idea where it could have happened? It really confuses things. It really makes for a more difficult situation.
I wanted to ask about the reporting one, then I wanted to get a forward-looking idea with technology. When that happens, it's been explained to me, and trucking associations have told me once cargo theft occurs, it becomes so difficult because there's so many different agencies. My truck may be in another state, and then sometimes the agencies say, well, we don't want to handle it. It's a civil matter. Is that one of the other layers when we're talking about it, is having a system in place that if the event it does happen, we at least know in each kind of area who we really need to contact? Because I hear that that's a huge roadblock, as everyone throws their hands up in the air and they say, ask like Homeland Security or something.
Yeah, so reporting generally, so if we're talking about, let's go back, we'll talk quickly about strategic theft. Strategic theft, you're going to want to report it to the law enforcement agency where the load was taken control of. So if they use identity theft or fictitious pickup or a double brokering scam or something like that, the location where the freight was taken control of by that group that sent somebody to pick it up for you, that's where you're going to want to report it. With pilferage, we're talking about pilferage here, that's very difficult. If you left California and you're headed to Texas and you stop 5, 6, 7 times along the way and you can't tell law enforcement exactly where it happened, it's not likely that law enforcement's going to give you a report without you being able to give them specifics and for sure knowing that it happened in their jurisdiction. And you can't fault them for that because, that's time, man hours, things like that would come with taking in that report, trying to investigate something. The other difficulty is, what if it's perishable goods? So if you have 2 pallets of frozen meat stolen, even if it's recovered, what's going to happen to it? So you get into all sorts of difficulties around reporting. Now, if you do know where it took place, local law enforcement is going to take that report for you. What you need to be aware of is, let's say California as an example, local law enforcement takes the report for you. You also need to be aware that CTIPS, the California Highway Patrol, has a cargo theft task force. So once you get that local report from that local police department, you want to get that police report up to that task force, because that task force is going to take over that cargo investigation. And that happens in several of the states like Florida. Memphis area has a task force. Different parts of the country where they have those task forces, you're going to want to make sure that your local police report gets up to those task forces.
I really like that. That's some really helpful info for me as well. Strategic theft, call the law enforcement when it happens. Say it picks up in Nashville, report it in Nashville. But when it happens like pilferage, where you could went from Nashville to California and let's say Arizona, then we got to call Arizona, but we need to provide the details, and then you see if the agency has something else. So it's a two-pronged approach. Final thoughts with technology and hardware. I talked to telematics providers. We have tons of front-facing cameras, and you mentioned them earlier in the interview. Are you recommending yet, or is the technology there yet to have inside the trailer cameras? So then at least I can see if it's been open and closing. Has that been something folks are using to fight fraud? Or are we kind of still in the early stages to where we're working out the kinks, and then eventually it may be a valuable toolkit in a fraud fighting toolbox?
Yeah, I think the industry as a whole is making some pretty good advancements on the technology part. Now, cameras inside the trailer, they are available. That technology's been around for a while. Actually, Travelers has a Sting trailer that we use, that we loan out to law enforcement across the country, that has had cameras that face out from the trailer and down to see who's opening the door and things like that. And so that technology's been around. We're starting to see some carriers out there and freight brokers that specialize in the secure movement of freight, because they're responding to these big increases in cargo theft. So we're seeing some trailers purposely modified for that, because of exactly what you're saying, wanted to prevent that type of theft, or at least be able to document it. But there's also other technology out there. There's Bluetooth locks that will lock the door from the inside, that make it much harder for the bad guys to cut any kind of a lock, because there's no external lock. It's inside the trailer doors. We're seeing there are some companies out there that have designed trailers that are the rear doors are almost like safes. They have steel rods that go across, so you can't get into the back of it. Tracking's come a long way. The thing about tracking, the bad guys are very aware of tracking, so a lot of times they'll thwart the tracking, they'll fool the tracking. They have a device that's called the sniffer that will tell them if there's tracking in the load sometimes. So you really have to use a lot of redundancy when it comes to tracking, meaning you want there to be tracking in the cargo. Ultimately, you're trying to get the cargo back, right? Tracking in the trailer is great, but if I find you your empty trailer, are you going to be happy, or do you need the $500,000 of electronics that was in it, right? So tracking both in the trailer and in the cargo itself is really good. So there's a lot of advances out there in technology. People should really take an eye. We have an innovation page, the Travelers Transportation Innovation page, where we bring a lot of these vendors to our clients that they can go on and click. And that's open to the public. People can go to that page and take a look at some of that as well.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for hopping on the show again. This was some amazing info. In addition to the innovation stuff that you all have for folks to check out, if folks want to learn more about Travelers as well, what's the best way to get more information?
Travelers.com/transportation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Scott. We'll definitely catch up again soon.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dive into always great stuff. Check out the Travelers, folks. Cargo theft is such a huge deal. And I mean, I've done HVP when I did fleet operations. It's something that you don't want to sleep on, having the systems in place. Even something as simple as fueling up. There was a really good point that he brought up, talking about how they will target you when you fuel in Arizona? Well, a lot of times we get our drivers to fuel further in advance if we're running in and out HVP in certain loads. Fuel before going in the shipper. Kind of treat your loads like HVP. Make sure that you don't have predictable routes. You're not stopping at predictable locations. So shout out to that. Excellent stuff. Speaking of more excellent stuff here, I'm gonna give you all an interview. We're talking about cranes now. I have talked about buses, but I could not pass up this opportunity. I went to the Samsara Beyond event. They're a telematics provider as well as a technology provider. And one of the fascinating things in the space is that how companies are using these hardware devices to make things run better. And so without further ado, let's kick the video here. This is an interview with the folks at Maxim Crane Works. I'm talking with Dennis Collins. He's the Vice President of Operations. Let's kick it. Welcome to Samsara Beyond 2025. I'm in San Diego. It's been a wonderful event so far and super good opportunity to talk with some of Samsara's customers about how they're using technology and telematics. I'll let you dive in. So Dennis, tell us a little bit about yourself first, your role, and then we will go into what Maxim Crane Works works on.
Okay, great. So my name is Dennis Collins. I'm the Vice President of Maxim Crane Works, oversee operations and service for Maxim Crane Works. Maxim Crane Works, we're the largest coast-to-coast crane provider in North America with over 50 locations throughout the country. We do all aspects of crane work. When you think of construction and cranes, every aspect of it, is something that we do, from crawler cranes, hydraulic truck cranes, tower cranes, hoist. We do everything from assembling the cranes, taking them down, doing the engineering drawings, everything full turnkey service. And we work in every industry, from the petrochemical industry to, high-rise buildings in Los Angeles and San Diego right here, to new facilities out in, the middle of America.
Yeah. And so when we're looking at that, deploying the telematics and the asset tracking, I can imagine I've seen a few cranes. My first job was a security guard on a construction site. So I saw some guys from like Buckner Steel Erectors and a few others. How important is it to have the asset tracking? Because I'm assuming with these units, not only do you not want them to get lost, but you want to make sure that you're effectively using them. There's not many that cranes around.
Yeah, exactly. Historically in the past, before asset tags, it's a struggle, especially when you have over 50 locations, trying to keep track of the crane components, staying up on the maintenance, staying up on the serviceability of them. And nothing worse than going to a big crane site, erecting a 280-foot tower crane just to find out that a certain piece didn't get loaded. And then you're scrambling, trying to find it over 50 locations in the country. So with the implementation of the asset tags, the ability to be able to find equipment, know where it is, maintain it, account for it, ensure it's loaded in an efficient manner, and it gets to where it goes, is an absolute game changer.
I can imagine the maintenance aspect, before we dive into some of the savings, it's got to be, not only do you have the challenge of the powertrain, the block itself, but then you also have the pneumatics, the hydraulics. How do you extend them out?
So no, that's a great question. Like with the cranes, and we have so many different variations of cranes, but again, the cranes hydraulically operated, your hydraulic truck cranes, your tower cranes, the ones that we have, they're electric, and all of them have a very extensive maintenance requirements that you have to stay up on, from regular routine PM maintenance, picture your car, if you will, doing an oil change every so many miles, inspecting your tires, and that's the same thing that we have to do with our cranes, but on a much larger scale.
I'm curious about the PMs, because I remember I came from trucking. PM cycles were very important. You don't want to miss them. Do you ever tie your PMs into, let's say we need the engine, the oil change, and a PM and the crane? Or is it sometimes where you got to make sure that the innards and the other stuff that's getting erected needs a different PM cycle? Is that something the technology's kind of helped you be able to mesh together, so that way you're not having to bring it in for something a month later?
Yeah, so no, that's a great point. And that's, something with the use of telematics and taking advantage of uploading the different operators' manuals, the service manuals. When you are bringing in a crane for a service, you can take a look and see, hey, what else is due? Because the last thing that you want to do is take that revenue-generating piece of equipment, back to the yard to do a PM, send it back out, just to find out you got to bring it back in a week later for something that you could address when it was in the yard. So it really helps you streamline your maintenance process, better manage it, and more importantly, really predict and plan the maintenance better, which allows you to manage how you're ordering your parts, how you're managing your labor to be able to do those PMs, and keeps the overall maintenance costs on that machine down.
One of the cool
West
stats, I want to pull it up here real quick here, is the savings amount. So your company saved over $13 million in maintenance costs in 2024 by going proactively. So let's talk about that. When we're looking at this proactive maintenance, for folks who aren't as familiar with the crane game, where is the biggest low-hanging fruit in terms of these savings? Is it tire-related, engine-related? Where did you all see the most immediate results? And then what were some of the other cool things you learned along the way?
Yeah, so the biggest area we really saw the results, to be quite honest, was even before the maintenance phase, and that's changing the culture, getting the employees to understand that, we don't want to be chasing equipment down the road. We need to, really take the time, look at the maintenance schedules, staying in front of that. And it really starts with your PMs, doing good extensive PMs. Again, just like your car, you maybe have a 250-hour service for a crane, and then you have a more extensive one, at 500 hours. So making sure that you're staying to that schedule right there. You're doing it in a controlled environment. You're documenting that process. And by doing the basics right and in an organized manner is going to help reduce the catastrophic breakdowns that you have, which ultimately are going to impact your customers, and their job site as well.
And that's happened to me all the time. If you don't do the inspections, you don't do the PMs right, it's always an unpleasant surprise whenever it messes up. Talk a little bit about when we're looking at asset tags. You have 28 crane climbers. Talking about utilization. When you're thinking of the crane climbers, are these the most high value assets, or do you want to put asset tags on all of them? Or tell us a little bit how the asset tags have helped improve things.
Yeah, so with the asset tags, we actually have asset tags on about 100 climbers. So climbers are a unique, specialized piece of equipment, with 4 tower cranes that we use. So again, not every tower crane has one, so it's very important that we know where they are, which ones are up in the air, which ones are on the ground, and that we're able to maintain it. With the asset tags, eventually our long-term plan is to have an asset tag on every piece of specialized equipment. But like anything, we want to make sure that we're taking the time and we're doing it in a nice, controlled, methodical process. So, for example, with the climbers, we identified all the climbers that we had in the country. We went through, we made sure that we had accountability, we had good inventory of them, we had the proper naming convention in our system, and then we went through, we did inspections, we made sure we identified, picture 5S process, separating the waste from the good ones, and then once we identified the ones that we're going to keep in our fleet, then we were able to take the asset tags, connect them to our naming convention, put the asset tags on the devices, and now we instantly know where all those devices are throughout the country. We're currently in another phase with it right now, putting them on all of our man baskets, our material baskets, our expandable spreader bars. Why is that important? Because it's not only tracking the individual item, but it's ensuring that it's built in the system and that we have all the engineered drawings, that we have all the certificates for those pieces of equipment. So not only do we know where it is and that it's on a job site, we can ensure that we have all the proper paperwork documentation and that the inspections are current before we put them on the hook of a crane and service our customers.
Are the climbers the very large ones you see kind of jutting into the air, and they just kind of get built as the thing gets built?
It is one of those sections. Picture the vertical sections right there. Yeah, so it's part of the vertical section of the tower crane.
So that's one of the challenges, because you're going back looking through every single piece, all this types of scaffolding, and you're like, do I want to keep this? Is this worth an asset tag? Is it near the end of its life? And then you're like, am I going to associate this piece with this specific tower climber that I'm using, or is this one that can go and be interchangeable, I'm assuming?
Exactly, and that's one of those pieces that can be interchangeable. And to your point, part of the process too, and why you want to make sure that you do it right, is you want the right qualified folks looking at the equipment and really making that decision as to, yes, this is a good serviceable piece of equipment, it still supports the needs in the fleet, or it's beyond its useful life right here. It's time for us to probably properly dispose of it and replace it appropriately in the fleet. So you want to make sure you have the right people involved in that process. You don't want to just put an asset tag on to assure you can track for something if it's something that's probably not even worth tracking.
Yeah, and also you want to find out who's responsible. Now we have the asset tag. Now it's your job to check the asset tag. Is it charged? And then if it screws up, I can find somebody to yell at.
And the other piece is now with the asset tags and built in the system, you can track the maintenance on that. So if I have 5 asset tags that are due for a PM, for a maintenance or inspection, I know exactly where those 5 are, whether it's on a job, whether it's in a yard. So it helps you schedule routine maintenance in a more timely manner and also keep up on it.
And big congrats as well. You guys were the recipient of the Most Innovative Workforce Award. And so as you're looking at the worker experience, one of the cool things they mentioned was wearable devices. And so I can imagine, on a crane, having a wearable device is important because as you're building the cranes and operating them, some folks may be up. Talk about the event a little bit and what some of your thoughts are in terms of, is it like a shopping list? You're like, dang, I'm going to get some of this stuff. Or is it stuff that you're already kind of looking ahead to deploy in your operations already?
One of the great things to come into the convention every year at Samsara is part of the excitement is what's next. And, every year they kind of outdo themselves with coming up with something bigger and better. The wearable devices, wasn't expecting to see that. It was really impressive to be able to see that. And again, the reason why we come to these events is at the end of the day to invest in our organization to ultimately protect our most important asset, which is our people. And that's another example of, a resource that you can put on your employee to help keep them safe. And so they know that even though they may appear that they're on the job site alone, they're never actually alone. There's always support and resources there. As far as the thing that I'm really excited about, excited about all of it, but I really like the integration of AI into the DVIR process. It goes back to what we spoke about earlier. The most important aspect of your maintenance program is your daily inspections, your PMs, brilliance in the basics. And, I look at that as an employee that's in Boston or Philly in January, February when it's snowing. Are they going to take off their gloves to write out a discrepancy with that asset in the cold weather? Or are they just going to say, hey, it's good enough and get in it? Whereas now with the integration of the AI interface with the DVIRs, they can just talk right into it and it's going to record a very good description of what's wrong, and you're not sacrificing speed, safety, or anything else. And it's going to really help the lines of communication between the employees in the field and the service folks in the back office.
I think that's one of those underreported things that it's so simple and you don't realize it until you see it, the voice-activated transcription. Because I had the same issues with drivers in trucking fleets is they wouldn't fill out their DVIR. They Christmas tree it. And then their tire explodes and they're like, oh, I don't know. And it's like, well, you ran into a car and they're suing us now.
Yes.
So talking about from accidents and safeties and claims, it kind of all builds in. Blocking and tackling with DVIR helps you on the back end in case somebody decides to change lanes when you're transporting a crane.
As I always say, read the investigation backwards. From the DVIRs to your maintenance schedule, no matter how good you are, you always got to try to challenge yourself to get better. And that's one of the reasons, coming here each year, embracing and learning the new technology that's being integrated, because we had a good successful year, saved $13 million, significant reduction in accidents and incidents, but we're not satisfied. We want to come back, see what can we learn, what can we integrate to our daily operations, again, to ultimately, not just for the success of the company, but we want to see our employees going home every day. And we want them to know that they work for a company that values their safety, their professional development, and we're going to make an investment not just into the organization, but for them.
The final thoughts as well. One of the cool tech that I saw was cameras on the trucks for these various types of computer vision. I can imagine being on various job sites, tens to hundreds of subcontractors. Is there an advantage as well putting little cameras on the cranes so that way you can say, look, my guy did everything right. He went off for a lunch break. You guys ran into my crane or something. Is that kind of one of those things where you're not only protecting in transit, but you're protecting on the site?
Absolutely. I mean, you can add more cameras to the crane. And the nice thing it does, and we've seen this in exoneration with law enforcement when we've been involved in incidents, and the other vehicle has their version. And it doesn't need to be confrontational. We're just able to, hey, we understand your concern, but here's what really transpired. It's on camera right here. So, you're able to see your forklift operator back into the crane, So, and it just, it helps resolve issues without creating unnecessary confrontation on the job site. Yeah. And it just, again, it lets your employees know that you're valuing their safety and it's a resource to not only protect the company, but to protect them.
Perfect. Well, Dennis, thank you so much for your time
Thank
as
you.
well. Folks want to learn about
Appreciate it.
Maxim, check it out, see what you guys are working on. What's the best way to find out?
So I recommend you go on our website, MaximCraneWorks.com. Again, we service over every state in the country. We have the ability to provide crane support to. We have an unmatched safety record. We have the largest fleet of cranes in the nation, and there's no project too big or too small. So we look forward to partnering and taking advantage of every opportunity we can.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
That's going to be a wrap for this, but stay tuned. I have a lot more content coming from Samsara Beyond. Like big cranes, and I cannot lie. Some of those cranes are actually so large, more crane facts, they can take upwards of days to weeks to set up. So when you see the high-rise cranes, think of the folks at Maxim Crane Works. Super fun conversation. Let's shift gears a little bit now for something completely different. I'm starting a new segment called How It Started and How It's Going. Well, yours truly saw an opportunity. The folks at Aurora are showing off the Aurora driver live. They're doing a live stream. This is the coolest thing in the world. So I thought to myself, let's read it here. If they could add a lo-fi beat to the background, I will find a way to stream this on a giant TV in FreightWaves. Well, that's tomorrow, folks. The giant TV is directly behind me, but I'm putting it on What the Truck. So shout out to the folks at Aurora. Let's go to the How's It Going? They did reply. They responded back, done. That's right, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adding lo-fi beats with trucking. Let's kick up the live stream. This is actually a live stream right now piped in. We are watching the Aurora driver live while live on What the Truck. That's right. This is like Truckception. We are doing a live show, watching a live feed of a live self-driving semi on the highway. If those of you who are just listeners, the feed is split into two screens. On the right side, you can actually see a camera, the view from the cameras of it driving down the road. And on the left, you can see the integrated LiDAR camera and radar sensor array as it's picking up vehicles on the roadway. I want to give a shout out to the folks at Aurora. We just did a lane change as well. What's fascinating with this is there's been a lot of talk in the autonomous space about the technology, and it's fascinating and amazing to see companies say, let me show you. And I think that's the strategy, is you just have to see this stuff to believe it. And so, being able to stream a truck driving down the road with lo-fi beats is amazing. I know there's quite a bit of social media stuff with drivers who like to record their trips, and so this is one of those really cool ways. You can tell right now that it is already picked up on the LiDAR array that it's moving past slower traffic. It's like it's going. Check it out. That's right. And so we should see it coming up here on the radar as well on that left side. I feel like Ron Burgundy narrating live events. We don't need car chases. We just need to watch autonomous trucks go. So keep up the great work, Aurora. This is actually the fun part. I got to ride in one with Bot Auto as well. It was doing going through Houston traffic. And so this lane that the Aurora driver is driving on is going on I-45. So if you see one, be sure to wave at it. Got a little bit of housekeeping as well. We have the Freight Tech 100 event. That's right. You want to make sure that you nominate everybody. And so when we're looking at it, let me pull up the dates that you need to remember. Okay, early entry had started in July, standard entry in August, last chance in September. So make sure you you put in the stuff as early as possible. Key dates to remember. Last chance is August 18th. Nominations close, though, on September 1st. By the 22nd, we announced the Freight Tech 100 winners. And then at the F3 Future of Freight Festival, we will announce the Freight Tech 25. The Future of Freight Festival is actually, it now has before, so it's October 21st and 22nd. We've got the little video up here. Before that happens, though, on October 20th, I want to point out that we have a freight fraud hackathon. That's right, folks. And so if you guys are already planning to head down to the F3 Future of Freight Festival, come down a day early. What do you expect? Well, we've got some free API access from top logistics platforms, including search carriers, Genlogs, Carrier One, Sonar, and others. There's collaborative teams, we have prizes, and there's networking opportunities. So hackathons have been a great way for folks to come up with solutions, and it's really great to see companies willing to open up all their data sets and APIs so we can come up with cool ways to tackle fraud. I mean, that was the story earlier. We talked to travelers, and given the fact that it has really been up by like 93% over the past 2 to 3 years, better late than never, folks. Get out there, fight the fraudsters, fight fire with fire. As well. Coming up, we also have another virtual event in September. That's the other thing you need to put on your radar. This is called the Cross-Border Logistics Summit, and we're going to be talking all about cross-border movements and especially in those cross-border freight within North America. The reason why we're talking about it is, heck, Mexico is the U.S. trade partner, is numero uno, as they would say, nearly $800 billion, so you don't want to miss that out. Some really, really good stuff. Hey, that's it for this show. It's my birthday, but eventually it'll be your birthday, so I'm wishing you all a happy early and or belated birthday here from FreightWaves and What the Truck. While you're at it, check us out, Apple, YouTube, Spotify. Sign up. You've got me here all week, so it's been an absolute pleasure. All right, enough. That's been enough for this week, but guess what? I'll see y'all on Wednesday. Stay tuned, stay classy, stay rolling.